on KTLA back in the day. Anyway, Christy and Joe Horton, 9th anniversary, and Hugh Janus turning 10.
Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
It is the BJ Show. Today's date is Wednesday, December 3rd. John Combest, did I get that right?
You got it exactly right, Brad.
And you know what? It's another one of these days where I get the bell out and I ring the bell. Why am I ringing the bell, John?
Because you're listening to the LL Cool J song circa 1990 called Rock the Bells, right?
No, I'm listening to the Anita Ward song called Ring My Bell. No, that is the official Salvation Army bell ringer's bell that I was issued years ago. If you're out and about, you see the bell ringers. More importantly, you hear and see the bell ringers. Put some money in the kettle. Salvation Army does lots of good for the community, and the money stays right in whatever community you're in. If you put money in the Salvation Army kettles in St. Charles County, guess what? It goes to the St. Charles County operations of Salvation Army. So do yourself a favor, because you never know. You may be, what's that, the old Talking Head song? You never know when you might be in a position. You know what I'm talking about? The one that's in the...
I don't know that song. I think it's called, Hey, Only Give the Charity If You Think You're Going to Get Back Someday. Is that what it's called? Is that a Brad Hildebrand special?
It's like insurance. You know, you pay it in, and you hopefully never have to use it. You know what I'm saying? It's that kind of stuff.
And folks can go to C Block, yesterday's show, December 2nd, 2025, and we ticked through a number of BGH, Brad's greatest hits, in which you talked about, and we don't need to revisit it here, but Red Cross versus Salvation Army. And if you want to know the difference between the two, it's one of Brad's top 40, the 40 stories that Brad tells all the time. Brad's greatest hits in C Block yesterday, December 2nd.
John, my father, who's been gone for 23 years now, once upon a time, looked me in the eye and said, don't ever give money to the Red Cross. Always give money to the Salvation Army, because he was World War II.
And your mom looked you in the eye and said, don't ever go into radio because I'll never listen.
Yes, that's exactly what she said.
And you disrespected both of them by not following their advice.
That's exactly what she said. Okay, that is John Combest. Every single day of his life, he puts together this incredible list of important stuff you should know about the state of Missouri. JohnCombest.com, Combest. We bring in this gentleman right here. Your name, sir?
I'm Casey Kasem.
And he starts off John's top three with the amazing thing that he says when he does this.
In third place.
And John gives his top three.
You got us right in the mood with your bell ringing, Brad. When I hear bell ringing, I think go into the store for blatant consumerism. I think, oh, wait, the guy ringing the bell is that entrance, so I'm going to avoid him and go in the other entrance. But I also think about spending money. And a story that's not on johncombest.com today, because it doesn't have to do with Missouri politics or our elected officials in D.C., but it does have a local interest, which is why I'm bringing it up, Brad. A headline from St. Louis Post-Dispatch featured prominently at stltoday.com this morning. Costco warehouse proposed for Lake St. Louis would be 6th store in region. I think with the second half of that sentence, I think we're supposed to be annoyed by Costco, but I'm not. So here's the deal. This is brought to us by Hannah Wyman of the Post-Dispatch. She begins, retail giant Costco is pitching a new warehouse store here. It's 6th in the region. And the here is Lake St. Louis. The Washington state-based chain has submitted plans to Lake St. Louis's Planning and Zoning Commission to build a 195,000 square foot store on Lake St. Louis Boulevard across from Hawk Ridge Circle. Costco needs the area rezoned for the new development. If approved, construction will start in early summer 2026, so this coming summer, and finish by summer 2027. Now, Brad, I looked this up to see exactly where it is, but I figure you know Lake St. Louis much better than I do. In fact, you have several advertisers on your stations that are based in Lake St. Louis. Where is Hawk Ridge Circle for people like me that aren't as familiar with Lake St. Louis?
It's right there, just south of 40, right off N. You know, there's a lot of controversy about that area because of the fact, as a matter of fact, even Steve Ellman has addressed that. If you go west on 364 technically ends right there at when you cross over 4064, and then it goes from 4 lanes, 2 lanes in each direction divided highway down to a single 2-lane road. And there's a lot of people out there who are complaining about a lot of the new stuff that's coming in, and Steve Ellman has addressed that very well could be Page Extension Phase 4. So that's that whole area. It's that whole area right around there where if it used to be all the stuff was on, if you're going south on, I guess it would be, south on 364 or west, whatever it is, sort of weird because it goes to the southwest. But all the development was on the right side of the highway, and now
it's building up on the left is what you're saying.
Yes, and the whole area there. And it really has. It's become, if you take Highway N, and sometimes I will take that Highway N all the way out to the transmitter site, the KSLQ transmitter site. It's crazy. I mean, because there's subdivisions being built all along there, and that whole area right there is just really developed. So, and Costco, when they plant the store, they do their research, just like the latest one they built at 170 in Olive. A lot of people go, oh, nobody will go there. It's always packed. It's to the point where they're doing
I'm sure, and I don't mean to interrupt, I'm sure they do a lot of those studies. And in fact, in Hannah Wyman's piece here, she says, during a neighborhood meeting in October, Costco real estate consultants and Olson engineers told residents that the Lake St. Louis location was selected based on data analysis, which includes metrics like household income and membership density. Officials said they expect to see 6,000 vehicles a day at the store. So to your point, Brad, they're looking at the demographics here, and they're using whatever data they can get from industry to say, okay, these are people who've probably moved down here in the last 10 to 15 years. They're of a certain age. They're of a certain income demographic. That's who we need, and that's who we want.
One of the interesting things, let me just throw this out, John. One of the interesting things is if you go on Highway N, and those of you know that area, if you go 364 to the very end, you go on Highway N, and you keep going on Highway N where it narrows down to 2 lanes. I didn't even realize this until my nieces, all 3 of my nieces live down there off of Highway N. And to the left, that's O'Fallon. And a lot of people don't realize that. I didn't realize that. I thought everything south of Highway 40 there was Lake St. Louis, but no. I think Highway N is like the dividing line once you get a little bit south of 4064 but those subdivisions, and matter of fact, how you get into her subdivision, they extended Lake St. Louis Boulevard, which used to end right there at Highway N, and all 3 of my nieces live back in those subdivisions, and that's O'Fallon, which I didn't even realize. So I guess this is like in the very eastern area, the very eastern part of Lake St. Louis, because once you get a little bit east of that, you are in O'Fallon.
I am so glad you brought up 364, because if we're done with the Costco topic, why don't we go to 364, which is featured in story number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
Yesterday morning on the Mark Cox Morning Show, 97.1 FM, featured State Senator Nick Schroer from Defiance. And Nick was asked about the MoDOT snafu. It turns out that Nick was trying to head from Defiance to the airport, and the trip took him 5 hours to get from home all the way to the airport. Now, I don't want to bury the secondary lead here, which is that Nick was leaving town to go get an award, the Antonin Scalia Award from the American Legislative Exchange Council, also known as ALEC. But that's kind of secondary. The main point I want to get to that's specifically of local interest is that Nick was asked about what's going on with MoDOT. And Nick pointed out something that you and I discussed yesterday, which is that the legislature doesn't seem to have too much control over MoDOT. And that's been a sticking point for legislators, both Republicans and Democrats, over the years. In other words, the legislature isn't always able to say, hey, I have this project in my district. I want funding specifically for this. And they can't force MoDOT in many instances to actually follow through on the legislator's priorities. Now, the reason why I say it's of local interest here, here's exactly what Nick said on Mark Cox's show. Quote, case in point, there's a sound wall that needs to be put out in 364 out in my area. And MoDOT keeps saying, yeah, we've seen the sound studies. We know that it's needed, but we're not going to pay for it. And this is Nick Schroer, and I said, well, even if we put it in legislation, you're telling me you're just going to put your hands up and say, yeah, we don't care what strings have been attached to it. And then Nick goes on to say, so that's been one part of it. And he says that essentially MoDOT has been given immunity to kind of do its own thing without real serious legislative oversight. So Nick says that when the legislature gets back together, he says there's enough bipartisan, maybe angst or frustration, whatever you want to call it. Those are my words, not Senator Schroer's, to get together and say, what can we do to continue or to try to start holding MoDOT accountable for some of these projects that we need in our area. And Nick in this interview also talks about an effort by State Representative Jim Murphy that would actually be a constitutional amendment that people would need to vote on that would essentially give lawmakers a little bit more control over that MoDOT spending. So what's interesting is I'm not sure exactly where on 364 Nick is talking about. I'm guessing it's pretty far out west. But he says he's been pushing for a sound wall for a while, and MoDOT just throws their hands up, Brad.
Well, it's interesting you should bring that up. I'm coughing, John, so hopefully I'll be able to complete this sentence. It's interesting you should say that because of the fact that, and I sort of disagree with Mr. Schroer, or wherever. Oh, no, Ricky Schroeder, that's his name. Because of the fact that there's an interesting aspect of that 364 corridor that when it was built, those people knew that was going to be there. And essentially, MoDOT said, hey, you people knew you were going to buy in a subdivision that backed up to 364, which essentially is like an interstate highway. TS, and I'm not talking about my old boss, Ted Smith.
Yeah, you mean transsexual, right?
No, not even that. And I tend to agree with MoDOT on that because of the fact that being a lifelong resident of St. Charles County, well, not lifelong, but a long time, it's like we used to have the St. Charles Speedway right there at 94 in Junk Station. And then they built a subdivision next to it. And then the people complained, oh, my God, it's too noisy here. You didn't drive around and see that there was a racetrack across the street from you? And the same situation. If you buy a house that backs onto an area that you know is going to be built up as a highway, you essentially inherit that risk of, it could be sort of noisy. Now, they did, this is sort of nerds kind of stuff, because Brad knows nerds kind of stuff, they did put up a sound wall on 364 when they put in the new interchange there at Guttermouth, because of the fact that what that did was that put the roadway closer to those houses. So if you go along there, there is a sound wall that they put up, but they put it up because of the fact that they got closer to those houses with the sound. Is that John calling me? John, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, I'm hearing like something like you're fading in and out or something like that. Anyway, see, but can I say something right now, John? And John's going to go.
Yeah, say it right now, bro.
John's going to go jam fob. Okay. Here, you made the comment that the legislators are not happy about the control they don't have over MoDOT, right? Isn't that what you said? The legislators are not happy because they have a certain lack of control over MoDOT, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Then why the hell did they give them a 5-cent a gallon gas tax that increases every year? Why did Dave Schatz and all the stupid Republicans, we're anti-government, we don't want, we're going to save the taxpayers' money. Explain that to me, John. I don't understand.
Yeah, that's a great question, Brad. And so where you're wrong is all the legislators didn't support it. And Nick Schroer points out that he didn't support it, Brad. So let's not paint everyone with a broad brush.
Are you sure he didn't support it?
I'm 100% sure, Brad. It's called a fact, and it's called a vote that's on record. Yeah.
Well, see, we have, what do you call those people who are like, what does Tracy say on her station? What are those people called? What are they called?
Oh, Kinos, Christians in name only.
No, rhinos.
Isn't that what she calls them, Brad?
She calls them rhinos. Okay, that's the crazy stuff. And you know what? So you didn't end the story. Did Nick make it on his flight? Since he was 5 hours late to the airport?
Yeah, he was able to make it. Excuse me. So he says that he actually at one point had to pull over at least one additional time, I think he said, to get gasoline because he was trapped on the road for so long. But yeah, I believe he was able to make it to the event.
Do you know what?
What's that, Brad?
What you just said, John, I'm looking into the future, and because of the fact that Nick had to pull over one time for gasoline on the way to the airport, he's going to put in a new bill that there be a quick trip every 2 miles on any street in the entire St. Charles County area. That way he'll never have to worry about running out of gas when he's late for the airport during a snowstorm. What do you think, John?
Oh, that is not true, because he is not a big government Republican. He might have some legislation around an education issue. Can we get to number one?
Number one, here we go.
The number one.
Francis Howell has solved its superintendent issue, at least for now. 2 stories in local media that are pretty detailed. One is from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Another is from St. Louis Public Radio. Let's start with the Post-Dispatch one. In fact, we'll just go with this one. Monica Obradovic. The headline, Francis Howell hires superintendent months after $230,000 payout to predecessor. Now, if you remember the timeline, Brad, Francis Howell had a superintendent who left. They hired a new superintendent, Mike Dominguez, who quit before he even started under questionable circumstances, to which the entire district is still tight-lipped. So there was a crisis, and the district needed a brand new superintendent. They looked no further than its interim leader, Mark Delaney, and they hired him just the other day, Brad. And the vote, here's what I think is unique about it. You and I have gone back and forth, sometimes agreeing, sometimes disagreeing, about the ideological split in the Francis Howell School District School Board. Some liberals, some conservatives, everybody claims they're a somewhat moderate or conservative. But Delaney, the new guy, was unanimously supported by the Francis Howell 7-member board. It was unanimously approved. Now, from what I can tell from at least mainstream media coverage, there's pretty much nothing that the entire board seems to agree on unanimously. So this would seem to suggest that this Delaney guy doesn't seem to be far to the left, far to the right. Maybe he's just a superintendent that wants to get work done. Now, for folks who haven't heard Brad talk about St. Charles County school districts and their superintendents, first of all, if you're new to the show, welcome. And secondly, Brad has a nuanced position on this. And Brad, I want to make sure I get your nuanced position correct. If you ask Brad about a superintendent, he'll say, this whole thing, I don't know, it's so crazy. That's the nuanced Brad Hildebrand position. Brad, do you have a position on this new hire?
I do, and I think that what I'm afraid of is they did not do a really deep dive background check on it, because I heard this Dr. Delaney is not an American citizen. That's what I've heard.
No way, Brad. Is he going to run to Iowa and hide in a ditch?
Yeah, he's going to.
Is he going to get busted by cops in a different state for being an illegal alien that nobody bothered to check?
See, John references me. I'll reference myself. That we've talked about this on several occasions of the Des Moines superintendent who essentially turned out not to be an American citizen with an extensive arrest record. And, John, what's interesting about it is there's new stuff that came out about him yesterday, which I won't do in B block, but I'll do in C block. The story gets even more interesting about this Ian guy who is the superintendent of the Des Moines schools, and you won't believe 2 things that came out. It's like, hold on a minute. Now, in all sincerity, the crazy thing about this is Dr. Delaney's predecessor, who nobody will say why they gave that guy a job, and then he never showed up. Remember, the whole deal was that he was supposed to start like June 1st. They didn't show up. They go, oh, well, he'll be here. And then July 1st comes around. Oh, he'll be here.
And then he ended up getting a big fat check. And 4 days later, he took a brand new job in Oklahoma.
And supposedly there's something in his background, too. Have you heard of this? This is the story they won't talk about. There's something.
Yeah, and Monica Obradovic mentions that in her piece, that there was folks ask a lot of the board members back where he came from, which I believe was in Kansas.
Yes, I
they
believe
asked
so, yes.
him. They were asking the board members a lot of questions about the use of pandemic funds, also how he treated people on the board.
Yes.
So it would appear as though a lot of maybe the choice wasn't particularly well vetted.
Yeah, and it's amazing because of the fact that nowadays with the internet, you know this, John. You're an internet sleuth.
You could have, yeah. You could pay a search firm, or you could do a little Googling.
Yes.
And Brad, speaking of that, I know that we're over time. Want to take one moment, and after yesterday's show, want to thank a few people. Yesterday in A Block, excuse me, we talked a little bit about the U.S. Postal Service conundrum with mail-in ballots. I want to thank a few folks who shared that segment online on their social media accounts. The segment was shared by Franklin County Clerk Tim Baker. It was shared by the reporter that broke the story, Geoff Folsom of the Washington Missourian. And later on in the evening, Brad, Missouri Secretary of State Denny Hoskins shared our segment with the state of Missouri. So I'd like to thank those folks. You know, Brad, we don't do a lot of, I'm very hypersensitive about not doing a lot of flexing on this show or trying to talk about how great we are and how people love our stuff. But I think it is important to thank particularly those folks who were involved in some way or another with that segment. You know, Denny oversees mail-in ballots for the whole state. So I think it was telling that Denny chose to share our segment yesterday.
Now, John, can I also add something as well, too? It's interesting because I got feedback that as well, too. Remember, we talked about the fact that once upon a time when you went to the post office, like in some of the outlying communities, like, even O'Fallon was that way. O'Fallon, Washington, Union, places like that. When you went into the post office, there were two slots, one that said in town, one that said out of town. And if you were mailing something within the town, you put it in there. And I go, but now everything has to go downtown. And matter of fact, as far away as Springfield, Illinois, and even the Boot Heel, I think you say, even like
that's true, yeah,
all the way down to Boot Heel.
And what did the listeners say, Brad?
That's because of the Informed Delivery service. Do you know what this is about?
Oh, yeah, I have Informed Delivery set up.
Well, you're one of the very few, and that's the interesting part of that, is the Informed Delivery service essentially scans all the mail in, and then you can get an email. Do you get an email or do you get a text? How do you get it?
I get an email every day, yeah.
Okay, and it tells you what your mail's coming.
It shows me a picture of what's coming, yeah.
Right, that's the problem, and the problem is the Informed Delivery service, which the Postal Service thought was going to be a huge hit, has not been. Hardly anybody signs up for it, but that's the reason all the mail has to go through St. Louis, because of the fact that they were not able to put in the informed delivery processing equipment and all the outlying post offices, like the outer ring of St. Louis County, St. Charles County, whatever you want to call it.
It seems like one fix could be to put one in every major region. So why doesn't the Boot Heel have something that could scan mail?
I don't know. And to the point where nowadays with how computer equipment has come down in price, you would think that they'd be able to run like a lower version of it, like in Washmo or O'Fallon or Union, where that's what it used to be. Because when you did that, when you dropped it in that mail, like that mailbox, that mail slot for, like, example, Washington, it got a Washington, Missouri postmark on it. But now there's no such thing anymore. It's all St. Louis postmarks. And it's
if you're just joining us, Brad is reminiscing on the days when he would look down and say, "What slot do I stick it in?"
Never mind. Okay. And by the way, in C Block, remind me to talk about the superintendent of Iowa. The story gets even more interesting.
Oh, yeah. Hopefully they found him in another ditch.
No. Did you know? Here, I'll just share one little bit of the information I found. Did you know he was a former Olympian?
No. Was he a sprinter?
Yes, he was a runner in the 2000 Olympics. I'm not kidding you. That is a true fact.
That's phenomenal,
And
Brad.
Guess what country he ran for, John? It wasn't
Ethiopia.
No, it was Uganda. It wasn't the United States.
Oh, wow. The
Yes.
Ugandan headhunter Kamala. Okay, let's save that for C Block, Brad.
Okay,